Hello, boxing fans around the world. Thank you once again for joining Christian and myself for another episode on the Olympics on Talkin Fight. How are you today, Christian?
Well, I'm good. Yourself?
Good. I'm great. I'm really excited about it's Friday. Friday's always a good day. It's jam-packed, lots of things to do, lots of stuff to talk about. Typically, everyone's happy.
Ooh. Unfortunately,
The
this is
Olympic
going to be
world is
this is a bit of a rough one. The Olympic boxing qualification tournament for the Americas has been canceled.
wow. I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that.
No, I didn't think you were. Yeah, sir. I know it's all doom and gloom these days, guys. But that this is big news. So an official press release statement has been released, and I'm gonna read it for you here now, and it'll give you an idea of what their thought process was and where we're going from here. More importantly, so Lucerne, 15th April 2021. The IOC Boxing Task Force has been monitoring the situation in Argentina and the Americas ahead of the Boxing Road to Tokyo Americas qualifier scheduled to take place in Buenos Aires, Argentina from the 10th to the 16th of May 2021. In recent weeks, tighter travel restrictions and lockdowns have been implemented across the region, which have significantly disrupted international travel and posed logistical challenges to teams traveling to and from Buenos Aires, jeopardizing their ability to participate in the tournament. Given the nature of the event as an Olympic qualifier, which will award a large number of direct quota places, 49 in this particular case, for the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020, ensuring fair access and a safe environment for all athletes and officials is of the greatest importance. This is in line with the key principles followed by the Boxing Task Force, which remains committed to delivering a fair and equitable Olympic qualification process, providing certainty to the athletes and allowing sufficient time for them to prepare for Tokyo 2020, while always prioritizing athlete health and safety. Unfortunately, the current situation in the region does not provide the assurances needed for these principles to be followed at the event scheduled in Buenos Aires. For this reason, after a thorough assessment and consultations with teams, the Boxing Task Force, athlete ambassadors, boxing experts, plus the local organizing committee, the Boxing Task Force has decided to cancel the event and restructure the Tokyo 2020 qualification pathway for the Americas region. The Boxing Task Force studied alternative options, but due to the complexity and the nature of the sport of boxing and large number of international participants, in this case it's 400 people from across 80 nations when we take into account technical officials as well as the athletes, it was deemed not possible to either change the location with less than 4 weeks to go or to reschedule the event for a later date. There's a quote here saying, "This is a difficult decision, but it's one that puts the boxers first and gives athletes, national federations, and national Olympic committees certainty ahead of the Olympic Games in Tokyo." Now, this is according to Boxing Task Force Chair Mr. Morinari Watanabe. He goes on to say that the development of the situation in Argentina and across the region and the resulting travel restrictions to and from Buenos Aires could have resulted in athletes and teams not being able to participate in the qualifier, which is a risk that could not be taken. The Tokyo 2020 boxing qualification pathway for the Americas region has therefore been restructured in order to reflect the cancellation of the event. The Boxing Task Force has confirmed the following approach. Considering that only boxers registered to compete in the Americas qualifier would have had a chance to gain one of those Olympic quota places originally at stake at the event, the allocation of the 49 athlete quota places, that's 33 for men and 16 for women, of the Americas Olympic qualifier will remain exclusive to the athletes registered for the event. All 49 quota places for the Americas Olympic boxing qualifier will be allocated via the Boxing Task Force rankings in accordance with Section D3 currently found in the Tokyo 2020 qualification system for boxing. That was updated in March 2021. So the reallocation now of the 13 quota places originally due to be attained through the World Olympic Qualifier that was and redirected to the Americas will now be conducted only after the allocation of the 49 athlete quota places for the Americas Olympic Qualifier, and will follow the eligibility criteria found in the current Tokyo 2020 qualification system for boxing. Now, it should be noted that the registration of the athletes by the relevant national federation and National Olympic Committee to participate in the America's Olympic boxing qualifiers will be understood as participating in one of the Olympic qualifying events organized by the Boxing Task Force, and serve along with other criteria for the purposes of allocating such quota places. An updated version of the Tokyo 2020 qualification system for boxing, reflecting the aforementioned changes, will be published following formal approval by the International Olympic Committee Executive Board, which is expected by the 7th of May. The Boxing Road to Tokyo European qualifier is still due to resume in Paris, France, where the event is scheduled to be held from the 4th until the 8th of June. So we're down another tournament. Is the practical takeaway from this one, Graham? This brings with all the same host of problems that we're seeing with the other ones, with the other tournaments that have been canceled with the World Qualifier. So we're going to be looking at rankings going back to 2017. This is not going to be taking into account things like World Youth rankings. So some of our younger athletes are definitely going to be kind of nudged out of an Olympic spot at this point, based on the fact that they don't have relevant rankings dating back far enough to secure them a quota place now.
Wow. So did I hear then that the announcement will be made on May 7th as to when, like, who can participate? Like, is it?
I think the final announcement. Well, no, the announcement coming out on May 7th is going to be an updated set of guidelines that is now going to show this America's tournament as being canceled, because this announcement will still come out technically before that tournament would have taken place, and it's going to outline more thoroughly than what I've done just now in this press release the actual qualification process that's going to be used in order to select those quotas, those people to fill those quota spots. And again, it's going to look almost identical. I can't see it looking any different than what we're seeing with the canceled World Qualifiers that were due to be in Paris in June. So, but again, those the World Qualifier spots, as mentioned in this, won't be handed out for North America. There's 13 of those up for grabs as well that would have been from that World Qualifier tournament in June. Those are now not going to be awarded to North American athletes until they've already decided who the 49 America's not North American. Till the 49 quota spots for the Americas have now been filled. Then they'll start looking at who's the best of the best who didn't qualify for those first 50 or so spots.
And there's no date, though, as to when those decisions will be made? Like, I'm just curious whether they're extending it all the way to July. Like, you find out 3 days before the Olympics that you're eligible to go play?
Well, no, I wouldn't think so. I think as soon as these quotas are going to be put up, then we're going to have our full card from the Americas. Same way that we're already seeing boxers like Nettie Petecchio out of the Philippines, who's already been handed her ticket to Japan based on her rankings from what would have been the World Qualifier instead of the World Qualifier. So we're already seeing African, Asian, and Oceania boxers who are already being handed their tickets based on their rankings alone. So the only thing that has to happen before we'll know who's going to qualify based on rankings outside of it. Well, it's still all going to be based on rankings, I guess, at the end of the day. This is all getting a little confusing. But yeah, the 49 spots are going to be allocated. That's going to happen. The only people eligible for one of those 49 spots are people who are already registered to fight in the tournament that's been canceled. So if you were already scheduled to fight, you've got a chance at one of those spots. If you were thinking about it and hadn't registered yet, then you're out of luck. Even if you're top seeded right now, you're not going to be handed one of those. Once those are taken care of, then they're going to take, as soon as that's taken care of, I have to assume now, then we're going to hear, you know, pretty much instantly who's going to get those 13 top spots. But it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to have to take a further look into this. This was only announced a few hours ago. So, because you have to keep in mind as well, not every weight class has the same number of quotas being allocated. So for certain weight classes, and we saw this in the last two tournaments as well, and what we are also seeing at the canceled World Qualifier, where we're going to see, you know, for some of the men's weight classes, we might have 4 quota spots that still need to be filled, but only 3 in the women's classes, in each of the women's classes. And that's the same whether it was going to be a tournament or whether it was going to be this new qualification. And in a tournament, an actual tournament setting, what we would have seen is a box off for 3rd place among the bronze medalists to allocate if there was only 3 spots available as opposed to 4. 4 spots available, when we go, both bronze medalists would end up taking a ticket to Tokyo. So I'm not sure which weight classes are going to be affected most strongly by this just yet. We're going to have to take a look into that. Out of those 49 quota places and out of those 13 extra quota places from the World Qualifier, how many of those are going to each weight class in the Americas? That I haven't looked into as of yet, but I will be looking into to let you know.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a heavy-duty announcement.
That's the boxing news today, and that's really the only news dominating the headlines when it comes to amateur boxing, Olympic boxing. As you know, we've lost another major tournament. Looking away from the news headlines, and I won't go so far as to call this a retraction, but I will bring this up here. Did you happen to catch Last Bell Boxing last night?
No.
No, you missed that. That was Carl, but that's our friend Carl in the UK and his boxing channel. Yeah. So he had a special guest last night, and he brought on Mike Orr from Knuckle Up.
Right.
Brought on Mike Orr from Knuckle Up with Mike Orr at 4, and he asked Mike the same question that he had asked of us. I asked Mike, him and his panel actually asked Mike many questions. They put him in the hot seat last night and grilled him for a bit. And I thought Mike acquitted himself quite well on the stand, I might add. He only had 1 or 2 where got 1 or 2 answers that got some raised eyebrows. But the question was about UK boxing fans versus North American boxing fans and the general atmosphere in the stadiums. Now, you and I, we had a bit of a laugh at our friends across the pond there and chalked it up to drinking habits. Mike actually had a much more lucid and thoughtful answer. Mike actually outclassed me on this one, which is why I feel this bears mentioning here. Mike made a very, very good point about who's actually at these fights when North America versus the UK, who's sitting ringside. And Mike pointed out, you go to, MGM Grand or something like that in Vegas, they're not boxing fans sitting in those first 20 rows behind it. No, they're businessmen. They're corporate seats that have been handed out to businessmen who are doing business deals in their seats. They're not watching the fights. They're not big fight fans. They don't have money riding on this, so to speak. Whereas in the UK, there's less of a culture of just handing out those corporate seats bribe's the wrong word, but inducement, shall we say? Right. So you're more likely to get the actual fans a little closer to the ring. And that was Mike's theory. And hats off to him on that one. I took the easy route and took a poke at our friends in the UK, and he actually thought through his answer. And, he's right. In my personal opinion, I think he's right, and that's why we get the difference in the crowds between here and the UK, and not just the UK, but other places in the world. I know you had to leave last week, so you missed part of the panel. But our little history lesson at the beginning of last Friday night's panel was a newspaper column from Toronto in March of 1920, talking about the mayor of Toronto at a boxing match doing exactly that, sitting ringside and not seeing a thing that was happening in front of him because he spent the entire 4 or 5 bouts that he watched shaking, glad handing left and right and making sure he was seen doing so. And the reason that was relevant was because the article was written by Ernest Hemingway, who, for those of you who don't know, was for about 4 years a journalist for the Toronto Star in his long and storied career. But so that's as old as boxing in North America, at least. That's as old as boxing goes. we've always had the glad handing at ringside as opposed to the fans. So hats off to Mike. He made a better point than I did. Credit where credit's due.
Well, we had an opportunity to go down to Las Vegas last year. I can't remember if it was just before the pandemic or not, but they were $20,000 seats, and they included some kind of 20,000, and it was hospitality included. But yeah, I mean, you know, you're going to be pretty friggin' wealthy to be sitting ringside at the MGM, watching a boxing match for sure.
Well, that's why most of these are corporates. You know, we hear $20,000 and we go, oh, is that a private box where I can bring 10 of my friends and it's going to be open bar and there'll be food and, you know, that's when I hear $20,000 to go to a match. That's what I'm thinking.
That's one seat ringside, and actually, I was fourth row up because then you'd be in the television view as well. If you're actually ringside, you actually wouldn't be in the television camera's view.
Well, we can't have that.
They were actually cheaper, like I think 15,000 if you're actually ringside, but 4 rows back you were actually like face level, if you will, and therefore that was the most expensive.
Well, you got to sit 4 rows back then, Graham, because otherwise, how will people know that you spent 20 grand on tickets?
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, thanks very much for this update. Sad news for the boxers involved and the trainers and coaches and the countries, but the show must go on, and I'm sure plans are well underway now to get those right boxers and the rankings all sorted out.
Yeah, again, the only people getting really screwed by this are if you're on either end of the age spectrum, is from an Olympic standpoint. Our really young athletes won't have the rankings behind them because youth rankings aren't taken into consideration here, and for some of our older athletes, you know, as they approach 40, because that's going to be your cutoff for Olympic boxing under the rules on the IOC rules. This might have been, you know, some athletes' last Olympic Games who would have possibly qualified under a tournament setting, and now that's it. That's all they get.
Yep.
Oh, well, hopefully we'll find something a little bit more fun to chat about this evening on the panel.
Yes, hopefully we will.
I'm looking at you, Big Mike. Bring the funny.
Right on. All right, Christian, we'll see you in a few hours.
Have a good afternoon.